Okay, so in this video, I'm going to start by creating some 3D forms in Cinema 4D, some really basic stuff, texturing it with some textures that I've made with processing, and then exporting it out as a GLB so that I can use it in Mozilla Hubs, which is a web VR based experience. So this is meant to be an introductory video for people who are just getting into 3D and maybe trying to work in web VR. I'm using Cinema 4D, and that's what I have open right now. You can download this if you're a student, and you can get access to it for 6 months, I believe, for just a few dollars. It's really worth it. All right, so I'm going to start off just by creating a shape, a basic shape called a 3D primitive, and we have a bunch of forms right here. Maybe we'll start off with something super basic, just a cube. And if you're new to 3D, I think a few things to acclimate yourself with. We have these three axes. X is the horizontal, it's red. Green is vertical, the y-axis, and then Z is the depth axis, and that's going to be blue. So this can help you orient yourself. If I'm trying to move around the screen, if I hold down 1 and click and drag, I'm going to move. If I hold down 2 and click and drag, I'm going to zoom in. And if I hold 3, I'm going to rotate around in here. So that is helpful. If you're opening this up for the first time, I'm using a layout up here called standard, and you can see different layouts up here and what they look like. I think standard is okay, just so we're in the same view, and also not to confuse you. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is create a new material here. We're going to go down to the bottom, this area, and you can think of this broken out into zones. I have some tools up on the side. I have tools on the top. I know it's a lot. Objects and takes, assets, modes, attributes, layers. Think of these as different zones. I think that's helpful. This is actually an animation, a timeline, and then this is materials in here. So I'm going to create a new material, either standard, or I'm just going to create a PBR, which I think is physical-based rendering. All right, so what I want to do is double-click on it. Right now, you can see that there are different aspects, different channels in the material. Right now, reflectance is turned on. Anything that doesn't have a check in it is turned off. So I'm going to turn reflectance off because I just want to put a texture in here, color. And so I'll turn on color, and if I wanted it to be blue, I could just change the color to blue. But I actually want to grab a texture that I created and use that in here. So what I'm going to do is go under texture, and I'm going to load an image. Okay, so I have a bunch of textures or images that I've created in processing that I thought maybe could work on some 3D forms. Let's grab one of these. I'm going to hit enter. Now, this is something to be aware of. When you're creating your file, it's going to create like a link to it, a path to it. You may or may not want to create copies of this in a separate texture folder. That's helpful if you ever want to send this file to someone and you want to make sure they get all the textures. So maybe we'll just say yes. Okay, so that texture is, you can see that image is being used as a texture. Maybe I just want to save this actually. The next thing I'm going to do is then take this texture that I've created, and I'm going to drag it. I can drag it right onto the 3D form, or I could drag it up over here. You can see that the cursor changed, and that's going to let me throw that texture on there, and you can see what that looks like. So that's how that came out. If I want to, right now I'm in this kind of editing view, but if I want to get a better idea of what it might look like, I can hit Command and R to kind of get a render view of this. Yeah, that's something simple. Maybe let's make another shape, a torus. This is another primitive. And maybe we'll just stack these. The other thing I want to show is you can get multiple views here. Like sometimes when I'm building these things, I want to make sure they touch. It's a little bit more helpful if I get up close and move it myself and just make sure that they're touching like this. If you click on the object down here, you usually get these options like, oh, I can change the ring radius, the pipe radius. One thing I want to point out is that all these 3D shapes are made out of polygons, and if we go up to look at the lines, or actually, let me do this shading with the lines, you can see these are the polygons. And so for something like Mozilla Hubs, which is kind of limited because it's on a web browser, you do not want to have like tons and tons of polygons, but we can go in and by changing the segments, we could create tons of polygons like this. That's probably overkill. You do want to watch it. Like you know, if you go down too low, it becomes, too geometric, too blocky. I mean, you might intentionally, I kind of like this shape. Maybe I'll just stick with that. That's kind of fun. I'm gonna, whoops. Again, I can play with this. Maybe I'll look at it from a different angle, just to make sure it sits on top. Okay. And yeah, let's go ahead and make another material. So I'm gonna go up to the color channel, turn the color channel on. Like I said, I don't need the reflectance because I'm actually just trying to make really small assets. Yeah, let's try this one. Let's see what that looks like. We load that in there, drag it on, and you can see how that got textured. All right, maybe the next thing I'll do is a sphere, another shape on top. And you can see this one got really, it's really kind of blocky, so I could put more segments on it to get it a little bit nicer. Let's create one more material maybe, and then we'll get ready to export this. Okay, yeah, let's try this one. Whoops, I think what happened is, I didn't turn on the color channel, so let's turn that on. There we go. So you'll get a preview in here to make sure it's working. Let's drag this on. Okay, there we go. So I have kind of like a strange, some strange 3D forms. Want to get ready to export these and see what happens. Okay. So as I've said, this is meant to be a really introductory tutorial. There's some things that I'm gonna kind of gloss over and maybe change. But I wanted to talk about the process of exporting this. One thing before we even export this is, if we don't like the scale of the textures, there is something we can do. If we click on the texture and we go down to length, U and V. So U and V stand for the X and Y, horizontal and vertical, and so we can kind of scale it up and down. So for example, if you feel like this pattern is a little bit too small, maybe if we make it 200 by 200 to keep it proportional, you can see it gets larger. And I think I might have changed something up here. I changed the length of this, and I think you can see that. Maybe we'll change this up at the top. Okay. Yeah, so again, this is nothing too pretty. It's just something quick and easy. The next thing we're going to do is export this for Mozilla Hubs. We're going to export a GLB file. And let's see. You can pretty much keep this the way that it is. The one thing you want to check is that I think by default it's GLTF, but we want to go to GLB. Go to export. And one thing I noticed is that it wants to save it as a GLTF temp, but you can just change it to GLB up here. this seems to fix import issues in Mozilla Hubs. So I'm going to say example 1A, and that should be exported. Let's go over to Mozilla Hubs, or in this case, the way that you create your own hubs is by using something called Spoke, and we'll create a new project in here. I'm just going to use a preset. It's going to take a little bit of time to load the project. It's going over the web, but it's going to open up this kind of template, and from there I'm going to import my files. So you can see this is the gallery space. I'm going to zoom in to get around here. If I click and drag, I start rotating. If I use the mouse scroll wheel, I can zoom in and out. That's a quick way for me to navigate. And if we go at the bottom, there's on the bottom left, there's something called My Assets, and this is where we can upload our files. I have some other files that I've uploaded a little while ago. Let's grab that GLB file. So this is putting it into My Assets. You can see the file here. I can click and drag and drop it. I noticed that these files are kind of large. So when I put it in, I think it's like so large that I can't really see it. So I've had to scale this down a lot. I think I ended up doing it like by 0.005 or even more. And yeah, you can see what that looks like. We have these arrows again, the red, green, blue arrows, and we can move it up as we need to. Okay, so this is what that looks like. This is the thing I created. So we got all the textures in there. Like I said, it's just a quick and easy way to do it. One thing that I might do is, like, I noticed like this texture came out pretty dark and dingy, so I wanted to show one way to get this at a little bit higher contrast when you export your files. So let's go back to Cinema 4D, and what I'm going to do is grab the material again and turn on the luminance channel. The luminance means light. I think by default it's at 100. I might have messed in here earlier. What I'm actually going to do is load that same image on there. So that's going to emit light. And depending on how bright you want it to be, imagine if you want it to look like a brightly lit screen, you might want to pull this up or down. I think I could put it like maybe halfway out. I think that's okay. These other things, yeah, maybe I'll want to make those bright too. So I'll load the same image. This is just a little trick. Again, I'll bring that down. You might as well do it to all of them just so we can see. Make sure you turn that luminance channel on. If it's not checked on, it's not going to do anything. And I believe it was this one. And part of this is like tweaking it as you go. All right, so we'll do the same thing. We'll go to File, Export, GLTF. Again, make sure you're coming out as GLB. Let's call it example 1B. I want to call it GLB. Let's go into Spoke, which again is that editing tool for Mozilla Hubs. And we'll grab 1B. Upload that file. Let's click and drag it in here. Again, it'll probably be really large, so I want to go and make sure I click on it and maybe scale it 0.05 or 0.005. There we go. And you can see this one comes out a little bit more intense, more saturated, and I think that's up to you to figure out, like, to tweak. If you want it to look more like this, maybe it looks more like it's illuminated, or if you want it to look kind of dark. But this is just a quick way to take some simple textures. We did it in a few steps. Bring it into Mozilla Hubs. using the Spoke editor. And from here, we could go to publish this by clicking on this button. It would create a room, and it would share this with other people, and we can invite people to join us in the art gallery. Just so you know, a few things to think about when you're publishing this scene. I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of polygons, or that polygons can cause an issue. So there is sort of a limit or a range that Mozilla suggests. This scene, I think, came with a lot of materials because there's surfaces by default, but this will give you an idea of where you stand in terms of how intense the scene is. Right now we're just publishing the scene, and from there you can view the scene and share a link with other people. Again, you can create a room with the scene, edit it. Here we are in the actual space, and you can see what this looks like. I'm using the arrow keys just to navigate. This first one we did looks a little dark. This one maybe a little bit brighter. Again, we could probably tweak this setting as we need to. But that's how to get started.